But I want to move to the technology piece. I know for many people, they're just fascinated by the carriage. They're fascinated by this way of life that looks so different than our modern day of life. And many people will think of the Amish as Luddites, that they just avoid all technology, but we know that's not true. There's deep reasons for this very intentional relationship that they have with technology. Could you describe to us a little bit about that relationship they have and why they take so much time to consider how technology would impact them?
Well, the technology is a very interesting thing because it's very public and distinctive. And when a new practice comes along, say a new type of technology, they ask one basic question. And the question is this: if we adopt this thing, how will it impact our community? Will it harm the community or will it tear it down? Will it strengthen the community and build it up, or will it increase fragmentation? And so that is the kind of fundamental question that they ask when they screen things. I often talk about them negotiating with modernity. And what they do when a new item becomes available, they may accept it without much discussion, such as LED lights on their buggies, which is a fairly modern kind of thing that they'll accept. They might accept things like gas-fired grills or state-of-the-art birding equipment. And on the other side, things like television, radios, high school, electricity off of the public grid, all of those things they rejected. But in the middle, there's a whole lot of things that are ambiguous. And so many times they sort of make a compromise and say, well, we'll take this part of the new item, but not that, or we'll control it this way or that way. The first item like that in the 20th century was the car. And the car was, becoming very popular. And the Amish people were worried if we accept a car and have drivers with a license, it's going to fragment the community, it's going to pull the community apart. And so their deliberate decision to reject the car was to keep the community together, because once you have a car, people are driving around all over the place. But they negotiated that in this sense. They said, well, we will permit people to take a ride with their next door neighbor and ride in a car, but they can't own it. And so it was a two-way thing. And I've often said they've out-Ubered Uber because they have been using Uber transportation for the last century by hiring a neighbor to take them somewhere. But today they also continue doing that, but they aren't permitted to have a license and drive a car and so on. But the point is that it's a great example of how their primary concern in selecting or rejecting a technology is its impact on the community. And so you're exactly right, they're not Luddites, but they selectively use technology. They use a lot of it, but they use it thoughtfully and look at its impact on the community.
Yeah, this big question, I think, relates to all of us. So how will this new technology impact my family, my business, my church? Those kind of intentional questions, I think, is one of those big lessons we can learn from the Amish. There's another lesson that you write about, and it's the idea that they essentially have a fear of bigness, and they have this idea that keeping things small is better. Now, that runs against everything we see everywhere else in our culture that really celebrates bigness and scale and growing everything and growing our churches and growing our friendship community and on and on and on. It's all about growth and scale. And yet in this community, when they start to see that coming, they start to move away from it. Talk to us a little bit about that principle and why that's so important to them.
It's interesting that you moved to that next, because if you had asked me what are the three big takeaways, I would have said, first of all, in terms of lessons, it's community. The second one is smallness, and keeping things small. I stumbled upon this a number of years ago, interviewing a carpenter in his carpentry shop. And I said to him, he was just working with his son, the two of them together. I said, do you ever think of getting bigger? He stopped and he said, no. Bigness ruins everything. And it's true. The Amish have a fundamental aversion to bigness. What's striking about bigness is that it leads to bureaucracy, and bureaucracy is one of the big developments in the 20th century, whether it's commercial or industrial or government, the growth of bureaucracy. There is not a trace, Gabe, of bureaucracy anywhere in Amish society. There's no centralized office, no centralized place you can go to get information. As one Amish guy said to me, he said, "We don't have a pope, but we have a lot of bishops." So their congregation is small, and the way they keep it small is when they outgrow the possibility of gathering in a church, in a home together, as it gets bigger, they simply divide. And so they're continually keeping that church unit small, and schools are small. Amish businesses are small, and they have this strong feeling that when you move in the direction of bigness, individuals become only a number. They become only a clog in the machine. And so by keeping the focus on the local congregation, it really prohibits the drift toward bigness. Yeah. I want to add another thing to this. I have some friends that talk about the fact that the institutional church should be dismantled, or that we should deconstruct the institutional church and go back to small groups and home churches. The Amish are a living example of house churches. They have no buildings, no church buildings. They have no budget. They are a living example of house churches that together keep their identity and have a quiet, vibrant witness in their uniqueness and distinctiveness.
Yeah, and it seems that the other principle I know that they focus on is limited choices, and this concept that the more choices we have, we tend to think it'll make us happier. But for them, they focus on limiting choices. And I know in your research and your work, you would say through that, they actually become more fulfilled. Their mental health might even be better because they've limited choices. Could you say more about that?
Yeah, and it's actually not new with the Amish. Psychologists recently in the last 10 years have shown how clearly we have greater happiness and greater joy if our choices are limited. If we make a decision between 7 types of pizza instead of 35 types of pizza, for example, or whatever. But they would really argue, let's take dress, for example. In our society, the way we dress articulates our individual uniqueness. In their society, where the dress, some parts of it, are limited by the church and regulated by the church, I think they have greater joy and greater happiness because they're not incessantly shopping all the time. And for them, their dress signifies which team they are on. It signifies that they're on the church team, and the focus of the dress and dress practices doesn't point to themselves, but it points to the church and the fact that they are on the church team and not trying to call attention to themselves. So, yeah, you're exactly right. They believe that with fewer choices, there's great wisdom and it brings more joy.
The other thing you mentioned, talking about smallness, was this idea that they don't have a lot of bureaucracy. I mean, some people would be surprised to know they make these decisions as a community. So when it comes to these new technologies, like whether we should introduce a landline phone to the community to all serve, I know when I was researching one of these communities, there was a big debate. Do we put a phone in the center of the community so that anybody who wants to use it, we can see them walk into that phone booth and use it? Because that would create this accountability community-wide that not one person's always on the phone or always trying to get outside the community through this phone line. But those decisions are made as a community. There's not some person in charge that just tells the community what to do. How has that functioned well? You would think that would create so much debate and divide, but they've seemed to work this out.
Well, you're correct. These decisions often take a decade or so. After a number of years of testing the phone, a woman said to me, well, it's still on probation. And we still have to talk about it. We still haven't come to a consensus. But what happens is if they're in the local congregation, they have communion twice a year. And if they can't come to an agreement and have harmony, let's say if there's debating over the telephone or some other type of technology, and they're arguing and they can't get to harmony, then they will delay communion. They'll postpone communion, maybe 2 weeks or 4 weeks. And so that builds pressure inside the community to arrive at some agreeable. They may not all agree exactly, but at least they're willing to go along with the idea that's emerging so that they can live in harmony.
Yeah.